Welcome back to Write, Publish, Connect, a video series by Aaxel Author Services. My name's Natalie, and again today, here is Alexa, founder of Aaxel Author Services. Hey, Alexa.
Hi, Natalie.
So in one of the last episodes we talked about publishing fiction. And today we really want to focus still on that writing aspect, less on the publishing, but we really want to look at that nonfiction writer, right? Somebody who is thinking about a subject that they want to share about. And what are the particularities about this? Because much different than fiction.
Yes, exactly. And one of the first things I want to clear up right off the bat is I'm not including memoir and creative nonfiction here because that's still very much, that craft still very much imitates the rules of fiction in terms of storytelling. Here with nonfiction, I'm really talking about if you're writing a book on a subject, you want to educate your audience, on real estate investing, on gardening, something very concrete. It doesn't have to be academic, but something really where your primary goal is sharing information. And that is a whole other type of writing than storytelling. You still want to incorporate stories into it, but the overall objective is different.
So when it comes to nonfiction, though, is there a process that you follow, though? Like with an author, like, do you ask them to do something in particular so that there is a flow?
Yes, well, absolutely. I would say the very first thing that is so important when you're writing nonfiction and tackling a nonfiction manuscript, organizing your content before you even start is really critical, because something that I see a lot of nonfiction manuscripts, a mistake that I see quite often is writers will introduce key terms. They will introduce key concepts, but they won't explain them right away. Without even because they know their content so well. Like to them, it's just second nature. So they'll throw in a concept or a key term, and I'm there wondering, okay, but what does this mean? What is this person talking about? And then let's say like 6 chapters later, they actually decided to dissect that term. But you've already lost everyone because you introduced this term without even realizing it. You already used it like 20 times, but you're only now deciding to explain it. So it's so important that you organize your content in a way that it flows, but that also people are able to take in the content in small, manageable chunks without getting overwhelmed. So, I was reading a manuscript just last week where an author was talking about, he was actually talking about the church, the Catholic Church, and he threw in this term that I was not familiar with. And he's going on and on with this term. And then finally, I believe it was chapter 5 or 6, he devoted a whole chapter to that term. So I said, great chapter. Now you've got to move it to like chapter 1 where you first introduce it, because I found myself, so really being mindful. So I would say you create a good old outline of your manuscript, but go a little deeper and think, what are key terms? What are key words and concepts that people who are not in my industry, people who are not familiar with this topic will not be familiar with? Make up that list and then decide, when am I going to introduce these? If you already have a first draft of your manuscript, go back and do a good old find function in Word. Oh, look at that. I already mentioned this term in chapter 1. But I don't know if I want to bring that up there, because if I don't explain it right away, my reader might just get confused and frankly give up on the manuscript, which you don't want. So a structure for the big main features or components of your content, but then a really specific list of those terms, and decide when do you want to introduce those, and make sure that when you introduce a concept, if it's a really important one, introduce it fully from the get-go. Give us that description, give us that definition. Don't wait a few pages while people are not even taking in your content anymore because they're so curious about, what does this mean?
So it reminds me a little bit of being mindful of writing the content, but remembering that if you're writing it because you want to teach something, that you have to be able to, think about what the reader, doesn't know. Like, go back to when you were learning about it. How did you learn about it? And how would you want it to be taught? Because I think that's where it gets lost in translation, because if you're only introducing in chapter 5, it's because you know it, and I think that's what we forget when we have a specialty, right? We forget, like, well, this just makes sense.
It's so funny you say that, because it's really something that we have to be mindful of. Don't assume that everyone knows everything that you know.
Yeah.
And that can apply to so many different things. I mean, we could go on and on about that, but it's so true. So yes, you've written a book, let's say, on real estate investing. Yes, you're obviously writing the book because you want to share info, but don't assume that the things that you know are things that everyone else will already know off the bat, because they're picking up your book, right?
And so what jumps to mind for me right now is, when I work with clients, I always tell them they have to source material. So when they source it, they have to give credit where credit is due, because obviously if you didn't come up with it, it's not yours to own. So in this kind of instance, people need to source information. What is the rule of thumb that you would have for sourcing information?
Okay, that's a great question, because absolutely there's nothing wrong, and it's important, especially it's important to add credibility to your own content, to source other authorities on the subject. Absolutely. But there are a couple of things to keep in mind. The first thing, and I see this sometimes, and I've done it myself in my college days, where, when you have to write a paper and you just don't know, oh my gosh, like I don't know nearly as much as all these other great scholars, so I'll just quote all of them. And then your writing ends up being the complementary component to all these other authorities. And believe it or not, I actually see quite a few manuscripts falling into that, where there'll be this little paragraph of original thought by the writer, followed by 2 big chunks extracted from other scholarly journal articles. And then there's another little paragraph of original content. So don't hide behind resources. They are important. They are absolutely important. But this is your manuscript. You've got to own it to a certain degree, and dare be bold and contribute your own thought. The second thing I would say, and this is really important, especially for older writers, be mindful of how contemporary your resources are. People love quoting Norman Vincent Peale, Tony Robbins. I'm not going to throw in Gandhi, because Gandhi's in a class of his own. I get that. Yeah. But I'm talking about gurus who were gurus, let's say 20, 30 years ago. Yes, they are still very respected and their names are still recognized, but challenge yourself. Like, okay, so there's Tony Robbins. I really love this Tony Robbins quote. What about people after Tony Robbins? Is there anyone more contemporary, just to diversify a little bit, not to take away from these established authorities who have millions of fans and they are clearly undisputed authorities in their subject?
It makes them relatable too, right?
Yes, exactly. But I would also argue it adds some freshness, and it shows that you are in touch, not just with the people who came before you, so to speak, but who are your contemporary peers on the subject. And it shows that you are up to date, that you are current on that stuff. And that's really important, because we don't realize, Eat, Love, Pray is a great book. But Eat, Love, Pray wasn't published 5 years ago anymore, but we don't realize that. It's like, wow, well, and there's a really easy way to if you're not sure about, okay, who are other gurus? Who are the alternates to, the Tony Robbins and all of them? Well, Amazon's a great place to start, believe it or not, because if you plug in those names, Amazon and their powerful algorithms, they will generate recommendations. And you'll see books published a couple of years ago, or even just 5 months ago, that have already taken off. And maybe that person has something interesting and arguably more contemporary to say.
I love it. So I know we touched on it a little bit, but I want to just wrap up with that. So the content needs to be set up in a way that's logical to the reader. How do you know what that logic is? Because
So I think, you brought up yourself trying to almost challenge yourself. Well, when I was first learning about this subject, so
yeah,
it's almost like I think that's a good first step. Take it back in time and make sure that, okay, does this make sense, this order, or am I jumping a little ahead? Another thing, and this is where beta readers come in really handy. Find somebody who really is at the knowledge level of your target reader and ask them to read a couple of chapters and ask them, okay, so are you already completely lost? Because you don't want your reader to be completely lost in chapter 1 and 2, because that is not a good place to start. If for nonfiction,
they're not going to read the rest of the book.
They're not going to read. They're like, okay, I have to go and get an even more basic book before I read this one. And that's not what you want, right? If your target market is at a beginner level, you want to cater to them. So you don't even need a beta reader to plow through your whole manuscript. Ask them to read a couple of chapters. Yeah. How do you feel? Are you piqued? Is your curiosity piqued? Good. Are you totally overwhelmed? Why? Why is that? Tell me where I lost you. And then you go back and that's a surefire sign that, okay, these are the areas that I need to revise and maybe simplify a bit. Maybe I'm showing way too much too soon.
So this is a great segue. If you do have a manuscript and you want some feedback, the team at Aaxel Author Services has a great service, and that is that you can submit your manuscript. I think it's the first 10 pages, right?
Yeah. So we do have a 10-page promo if you want to submit your first 10 pages, because again, first 10 pages are so important, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. We do offer the 10-page manuscript evaluation at a special price. You can go on our website, www.axelauthorservices.com, to learn more. And you can always send us an email with more manuscript questions, info@axelauthorservices.com.
Thanks, Alexa.
Thank you, Natalie. This was fun.
Thanks to everybody who's tuning in today. Make sure to tune in for the next episode. And remember, at Aaxel Author Services, we won't let you publish crap. Have a great day, everybody, and see you soon. Bye for now.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Alexa.
Thank you, Natalie.